Believe it or not, we are to our final lecture on chapter 18. Of course, we're in later adulthood and we're going into the social, emotional wellness and health and issues in that developmental stage. It starts with relationships later in life. Um, Both giving and receiving support can positively affect cognitive function, help deter negative life experiences, and lower the risk of morbidity and premature death for older adults. So, obviously, relationships are super, super important. And as opposed to what stereotypes may tell us, sexual interest does remain well into late adulthood. Sexual activity is actually a really positive part of older adulthood. And the issues with that are related to conditions that may affect sexual desire, inability because of physical decline, and of course, partner loss. In 2010, 56% of individuals 65 years and older were married. And again, that lowers risk of morbidity and premature death because the outcomes for people who are married are far better than those who are not. So we know that it's really supportive that the person have a long-term partner or marriage, that they're with someone and supported by many social networks. And in some of your interviews, I saw this come out in the interviews that you did, which I thought was really interesting. And some of you, I think, even read, you read ahead to prepare for your developmental stage of life in which you were interviewing the person. And you found that to be true as well. So good job, good work on those. I was impressed. Contrary to what you may believe, divorce and remarriage is something that does occur in older adulthood in this last phase of life. 22% of the population are divorced that are 65 and older. This can cause a lot of issues. There are adult children, there's grandchildren, there can be a lot of finances tied together where there's a huge economic impact on one or other party. Men are far more likely to remarry than women in this age range and all around in this 65 and older developmental stage. There's a lower rate of remarriage. It's much lower. Divorced are more likely to remarry than widowed older adults. But there can be a lot of pressure on these family systems. Big trend right now in this, I think I've mentioned in my PowerPoint. I think it's important that you know what's going on in our practices. Huge trend right now of this. Things came out during the pandemic. Affairs came out during the pandemic because they're together and why are you on your phone so much and things that people could hide prior to. Now have come out and people have been together and this all of a sudden may be faced with mortality and said, no, this is not what I want, I'm leaving. It sends ramifications through the whole family system. This is potentially the grandparents of two systems, their own unit and grandchildren, their own family. You've got sometimes parents still alive of this couple. It's far reaching. And adult children can have a difficult time with this choice, who to see, who not to see, who to be mad at, who to help. So it's something to keep in mind about the far-reaching impact for those clients. I know that I came into my office to record this lecture, and for some reason, I think my husband decided it was an excellent time to cut the grass. So I'm really sorry if you hear a lawnmower in the background. I keep hoping that he will get to another part of the yard that you can't hear the lawnmower. But he certainly, yes. So I apologize for that. I hope it's not too distracting. Widowhood. So women usually live longer than men. So 40% of the population experience the loss of a spouse, and older men only 13% because women, obviously, we live longer. So typically we would outlive our husbands. Completely can change everything for the spouse. Very vulnerable, at risk, especially minority women and low SES when the spouse passes. There is a high risk of mortality within 6 to 12 months following the loss of a spouse. much more so for men than women. And, sometimes you see this and you say they die of a broken heart. And that's really interesting to think about the impact of the social support from that union and how they've maybe been together for 50 or 60 years, and it's just um, so stressful and upsetting to be without them. So, as a clinician, look over the case of Rhonda and think about what those questions. What are your steps to help your client if they've just lost their spouse? You know this research, you know there's a chance of their premature mortality. Um, and what are you going to do? How are you going to help them with their grief? What are you going to know about medicine? You're going to refer to primary care because maybe as an SSRI or something like that could be beneficial to them in the interim. So, I mean, as an Ativan, I'm on the I jokingly have been calling this the Dr. Veal special, which is an SSRI plus a small dose of Ativan. I don't prescribe that, but I have a couple of doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs that I use in town in different practices. And it's so funny. And I'll say, well, just call them up and tell them Dr. Veal told you to call them that you're having a really, really hard time. Because sometimes they don't want to tell their doctors what happened. Their spouse left. It's not always death, but if it's death, they don't mind talking about it. But if it's they've left them, they don't always want to tell their primary care right away. So, or their whatever doctor they're going to. So, it's just been I've been kind of joking in my head like it's the Dr. Veal combo, but it's been thank goodness for meds. So never rule that, especially in a critical period where someone is grieving or stressed, where something can balance their brain just a bit to help them get through the next 6 months or year can be really positive. Increasing that social support, anything you can do to help them make sense of it and get through their grief and cope with their grief. There's another stage, another group called Never Married with Children. So their stats are a little different. 9% of people who've never been married in the United States are men, and women 65 years and older. They usually develop other relationships with extended family, like nieces, nephews, the big friend networks, etc. Older, never married individuals with children may rely more on those adult children to be that extended network of social support. The well-being with people who are never married with children may often be tied to their economic status, educational attainment, maybe their career, maybe they're a professor, they can work until they're 90 and they're very involved in things at their institution and things such as that, and that may mediate the offset of that social support. You may get that social support with your friends. And then again, when those friends die off, that could be problematic. Let's see. Of course, never married mothers have more stress, lower SES, work imbalance, really stressful. Siblings and friendships is next. That is the longest lasting relationship in older adult lives. They can really benefit the other because of that shared history, the intimate relationship. It's equal, very relational over the course of a life. It's involuntary, but later in life, siblings often value they have that sibling into late adulthood. I always tell my children, because I was an only child, my parents divorced, and I have 3 half and 1 step, and they are all like my sisters, but I was not raised in the house with one of them. So they've been in my life pretty much my whole life, but since I was the age of 7. But and I see all of them and their aunts to all of my children, etc. But I always tell my children that, you guys are siblings and you're going to be siblings forever. This is going to be you guys when we're not around. So I think that's really powerful to have that. I often wished I had that when I was little and did not want my children to grow up without a 100% biological sibling like me. So let's see, what else do I want to say about that? Very supportive in times of crisis. I would say that for my own siblings. I'm sure most of you can say that too. Sometimes it's not that way, and when it's not, that's problematic when you don't have that relationship with your siblings. So going through kind of all these different facets of this stage of life. We have adult children and grandchildren. A majority of adult children see or talk on the phone with parent at least once a week. That can be a really positive thing, that emotional closeness, and it can definitely bring along psychological well-being for both parties. Um, but when an older adult doesn't have a good relationship with their children, it can bring on depression and a lot of loneliness. Um, and then negative treatment of aging parents can occur. Um, Adult children often, they're the ones that give the support when there's decline. Um, so they're usually tasked with that, and that's that middle adulthood where we're talking about the stress of caring for children and then caring for senior adults. Research suggests that aging parents are more likely to give than to receive support from adult children. And those who provide financial and instrumental assistance to their adult children have fewer depressive symptoms than other parents. Older, older, like grandchildren, they do give a lot of support. A lot of times they're stable and they have better finances and they have more ability to help and take care of the grandchildren and help you out, and that's really good. Um, okay, let's see, LGBT relationships. This is 3 million adults age 65 and over. There's been a lot of discrimination and stigma here. And LGBT elders are more likely to be single and childless, estranged from biological family, and reliant on friends, which is so sad. Now you see marriage is legal, you see adoptions and having children, beautiful families being created, and a lot more support from friends and family in 2020 than in 1980. So think about that. It makes a lot of sense that they may be more isolated because of the way that went for them growing up in their historical trauma. And we talked about the different events that are going to shape us as we grow, and look at what this generation right now currently has been through. Kind of talk about a lot for you to think about this pandemic and think about how that has changed so much about what we do and what happened, a huge collective trauma. So it'll be interesting in 20 years to see how that's impacted all of us and how we've changed. But many LGBT seniors, both in the community and in institutions, experience differential care with their needs being ignored or untreated. They sometimes can be ineligible for assistance and support, which is really sad. It's not okay. Actually, interesting in supervision recently. So if you're wondering how is this coming up, right? We had a client that was being seen by one of my supervisees, and they have assistants, and they're beginning to have dementia, and their church is helping them, and they are a cross-dresser, but it was something that this person hid. It's a male, and hid for a long time. But with the dementia, it's not as easy to hide, and has another part that is a female name. So, is this person going through, transgender? Was it hidden? We don't really know because of the dementia, but we definitely think the cross-dressing has probably been a thing for a while and not related to the dementia. And the people who were helping this individual from the church were mad and getting mad at this person when they would dress up in female clothes instead of trying to understand, support, and love this person. So we kind of stepped in to advocate, or not we, but I instructed advocacy and care and empathy for this person, and to try to support this person where they were. But it's still going on, that stigma, and trying to change that person, being mad at that person, and this person really has dementia too. So it was really sad. So I just had the clinician try to reach out to the church and do some advocacy, some education, and helping them not be so afraid of what was happening. And I don't know if that, and I helped my supervisee kind of know how to navigate it a little bit. So I don't know if that was 100% what I needed to do, but that's what I did. Okay, elder maltreatment. Now, this is a big problem, right? There are ageist people, elder abuse, older women are at greatest risk. You hear about this in the nursing homes. You see all the people who have died in the nursing homes. It's so sad because of COVID. Just it's just really, really sad. Um, 2 million Americans 65 and older are victims of maltreatment, which is just inexcusable. So you, of course, as a clinician, need to be aware of that, need to know that, hey, this is happening, be looking for signs and symptoms of that. Psychosocial aspects of late adulthood. So we're back to our theorist. Oh, look, it's my friend Erickson. Ego integrity versus despair is quite easy to spot this when you're counseling. Despair is exactly what it says, right? There's no meaning. They feel like they've not accomplished anything. They have nothing but regret. They're helpless. They feel like they've wasted their life. But other older adults are able to have this sense of ego integrity. They're able to consolidate their whole life and look at it in the context of I was contributing in positive ways, but also negative things happened, making sense of them, and they were constantly growing and learning and trying to be their best self. Reminiscence is when I was a hospice volunteer, this was a big part, allowing them to tell their story, allowing them to recall past events. Really important for them to be able to do that and get their story kind of recorded by others. There are 8 purposes of reminiscence, most of which are positive, including identity formation, preparation for death, and problem solving. A lot of conversations come for this teaching, reminiscing to fight boredom, to resolve feelings, and that to decrease them so you can be functional and not lead to despair. It's a big part of that ego integrity, the reminiscence. Let's see. Theories continuing here. And there's a life review. It's one activity that you can help as a therapist. This is something you would do. You would further the potential of their reminiscence and allow them to review their life. They describe and reflect on evaluate their life experiences. This is very similar to what I do in EMDR with all of my clients. We are doing a life review, and we're reprocessing the things that are not maladaptive and not encoded into long-term memory in an effective way. And we're going in and changing that, changing the narrative. We're reviewing the life and adding in balancing positive thoughts will decrease the depression and despair. And we're back to PEC. PEC has task of old age. And remember, there's 3 tasks for successful aging. Ego differentiation, body transcendence, and ego transcendence. Remember we talked about ego differentiation. You are a person outside of what you do. I see people a lot just in my work, and that their whole identity is wrapped up in what they do. That's not, at some point that will wane and you will not have that anymore. So it's really important to have another identity, like who you are. Part of what we do in this program is help you. Who are you? What do you like? What do you not like? Whatever all the aspects of yourself. So you're constantly reviewing that and growing intrapersonally so that you can grow interpersonally. So really, really important. That's a crucial step for successfully aging, that you have an identity unrelated to like your children, unrelated to your work. And then the second task is that body transcendence, or redefining happiness and comfort in relational, mental, and creative activities with which the physiological declines of old age do not interfere. Okay, so because our body is going to fail us at some point, right? So if I'm a marathon runner and that's like all I do and that's my thing, I'm not going to be able to do that. Maybe I could, but there's a real possibility I won't. So what are all the things? Relational, mental. What's your happiness? Where's your happiness? We're considering some spirituality here, right? Some kind of greater than self, right? And then ego transcendence, actively investing in relationships that will go on after their deaths. I mean, it's not a reciprocal, it's more of like, how can I help others and be there for others and like be remembered as someone who helped and loved others. And then we're into Fischer. And this is the last time I'm going over the theorist in here. I know you guys are excited. So Fischer's got 5 periods of older adulthood. So the first period for Fischer is this continuation of middle age. It means either maybe continuing to work, maybe because people are working a long time now, we're living longer. Or maybe it's, wow, I'm finally retiring and now I can buy a boat, or I can travel the world, or I can garden, or maybe there's, maybe there are limitations to that because of finances. The second period is voluntary and involuntary transitional events which end continuity with middle childhood. Examples are needing to relocate, death of a spouse, a physical illness, decline in ability, retiring, working part-time, feeling the limiting effect of their age, but maintaining their autonomy, their individuality. Sometimes this is where you can experience some loneliness in this period. And then the third is, which is considered stable. Adults adjust to something called transitional changes made in the previous period. So they adjust and maintain their independence, starting to maybe achieve some goals, maybe reinventing themselves, maybe volunteering, kind of getting outside of themselves, and moving to the fourth, which is a significant decline in independence. This is when you lose your health. Maybe you have a stroke, you lose your caregiver, you've got to have like help to get around, or have greater dependence on someone else. The fifth and final period is when adults live with limited mobility and have to depend on others for care. Okay? And how do you get through those stages? Then we've got the last one, the vif, I don't know exactly how to say that. Affect optimization and affect complexity. So they spent years researching ways in which individuals adjust to adversity and difficult life experience while maintaining a positive view and well-being, right? They hypothesized cognitive affective complexity, which is coordinating positive and negative emotions into an organized self-description. It increases from adolescence through middle adulthood, but declines during later adulthood as certain cognitive skills diminish. Older adults tend to compensate for declines in information processing by developing increased affect optimization skills. So affect optimization, when you maximize your positive emotion and dampen negative. This is how you can face stressors and maintain positive affect. Affect complexity helps individuals gain insight from emotions, maintain objectivity, form a distinct and historically situated sense of self, blend positive and negative, greater perspective on emotions. Here's some good questions too on 436, top of 18.1. Maybe some things there to consider as you're reviewing for your quiz. And we're moving into work and retirement. Retirement trends. Social Security. Retirement was considered mandatory back in the day at 65. Not ever sure if Social Security is going to run out of money and what that would mean for people, because not everybody has savings for retirement. Making the decision to retire is very different now than it was before. Okay, can you afford to retire? I mean, a lot of people can't afford to retire. They're not 65. And they won't make enough money to survive. Sometimes retirement is not voluntary. Sometimes people are laid off from their jobs. Sometimes people do a bridge job. something that's not full time, um, following a full time career, making ends meet. A lot of retired people are doing Instacart. Um, went snorkeling in the Keys. The captain of the private boat that we took out, she did Instacart during the pandemic because obviously she couldn't do those snorkel charters. So, just, and she's probably in her 60s and from New York, and they've retired to the Keys. So it's really interesting, right? People have more options today to do things like that. Women do retire earlier than men. That's only dependent on their employment history. And ethnic minority females are more susceptible to poverty and chronic illness, thus needing an income that exceeds government support. And that's going back to ACEs and systemic racism, um, and the stress that impacts the body, and also the low SES and the stress subsequently from that. You really got to watch these people coming in who just retired, especially males. A lot of males die very shortly after they retire. So I want you to please make sure that you're looking out for that. It can be people think that retirement is going to be awesome, but it's a huge life transition, especially if you're made up entirely in your work. And Schlossberg here has a transition theory about that. Retirement is a major life change. The transition theory suggests that positive and negative changes typically cause discomfort. When roles, routines, relationships, and assumptions change, it can be unsettling. It takes a lot of time to establish a new path. There's a grief that occurs when they leave the life behind. There's so much that happens here. And there are 4 ways to cope with it. The situation, what is the person's situation? Are there other life stressors involved? Self, what inner strengths can they draw on? Support, what support do they have? What methods of coping will help it to be more navigable? So that's what you would do as a therapist, this 4 S's, right? And trying to help them adjust to this new life. How are they going to get meaning out of their life? What are they going to be doing with their life? Do they need to be a consultant or go part-time or volunteer? I mean, it is really debilitating for people to go right from a world of work to retirement, and they think it's going to be wonderful, but it's often not. I love my job. I'll never retire. And it's not because anything other than I have a lot of meaning out of what I do. It's not my whole person. I certainly may do it 1 day a week at some point, right? Or half a day a week, or I think that I'll always continue to work in some capacity, teach as an adjunct, or counsel. Will always counsel. That's a job that you just get better at every week, or sometimes worse when you have to step back. But you just learn and learn and learn, and to be a wise older counselor is such a beautiful thing. So exciting thing for us, and if you love what you do, that you can probably keep on working at least part time. Oh, I already went ahead of myself. Leisure and volunteer activities, super, super important. Volunteering, spending time with friends, clubs. That's why a lot of people move to Florida, the retirement villages, so they have support and people to hang out with. Older adult retirees can ask themselves what type of person they would like to be. So Schlossberg talks about retirement as not retreating, being involved, productive, engaged. And she recommends, I think it's she, I'm going to mess that up, recommends older adults consider these questions. Who do you want to be in retirement? Do you want to be a continuer? That's someone who does more of the same thing, but in a different way. That's kind of what I was talking about with me. Like, I'm probably still going to continue like speaking at conferences and whatever, and doing a little counseling and teaching here and there, but it may look very different because maybe I don't work, but when I want to work, or do some online and travel or whatever. An adventurer, someone who engages in something entirely new, someone who just completely takes on something new, like becomes a photographer or starts traveling the world, or as someone who's looking for a niche, as a searcher. When they're looking, what do they want to do? They're looking for some kind of new niche. An easy glider is someone who just goes with the flow. They just kind of go with whatever. They're open-minded. Just an involved spectator, someone who cares and continues learning, but is no longer a key player in what is going on in his or her world. And a retreater, someone who's given up. So we want to try to help our retired clients not be a retreater. Positive attitudes can obviously buffer from that. And meaningful, worthwhile activities. Can I reduce my stress through meditation, exercise, counseling? How can I be involved? There's a great case about Pearl. I'd love for you to read 18.4, active at 92. So read about Pearl. All right, social emotional development later in life. And we have social emotional theories of aging. So you need to know those. Selective optimization and compensation theory down the bottom of 442. It's been researched extensively. It's a lot of interest and has a lot of applications in later adulthood. According to selective optimization with compensation theory, I don't know why they had to make that such a mouthful, but is linked with three primary factors: selection, optimization, and compensation. So selection is when performance is reduced in areas. Older adults select what's most important to them and change their priority, such as dexterity or memory function. They make up for it in other areas to adapt. Searching for new goals, focusing on things that are meaningful. Also, optimization refers to the way adults optimize positive changes, thus finding ways to adapt toward a more desirable outcome. And then compensation takes place when life tasks require a level of ability beyond what they have, and they compensate in areas that may require sustained energy or focus, have high physical demands, or quick reaction time. Let's see, there's an example here for Rubinstein, who was a concert pianist. He responded that he played fewer pieces, selection, and practiced those pieces more frequently, optimization. As a result of aging, he no longer had mechanical speed that impressed audiences for so many years. To counteract, he slowed his pace before playing for fast selections, which made the latter sound faster to the audience. Compensation. There's a Roman Catholic religious sister, Madonna Buter, who is known as the Iron Nun. She trained for Ironman competitions at 48, an age at which most people have stopped. She ran her first Ironman when she was 55, and she's been competing ever since. She's the oldest woman to complete the Ironman triathlon in Hawaii at the age of 75. A year again later, she finished a grueling event before the cutoff time of 17 hours. Oh my gosh, the Iron Nun. We gotta look her up. She's amazing. Look at this lady. Oh my gosh. All right. It's pretty cool, huh? You will remember this because of the Iron Nun. Remember the Iron Nun. That's a good little trick to remember that one. More theories. I know you're so excited. Aren't you? Did you ever think that you would learn so many theories? You probably totally tuned out to me now. Disengagement, activity, and continuity. So disengagement is Cumming and Henry views aging as a process of gradual withdrawal from society and relationships, become preoccupied with inner world. No research to support this theory. Many older adults desire to remain occupied and involved with society. Theory largely discounted by gerontologists, which who study old age. So always know the opposite, right, for these theories, like the critique. Activity theory, Havikhurst. Remaining active and engaged is paramount to successful aging. Activity could be physical, it could be psychological, it could be intellectual, but that activity really improves your health and wellness. The weakness of this theory is that not all aging persons can maintain active roles. Some elders may persist in continuing activities that pose danger to themselves or others, thus denying their limitations and engaging in unsafe behavior. And then we've got Maddox and Ashley with the continuity theory. And this theory basically says in making adaptive choices, Older adults prefer to use strategies tied to the past experience in their own social world. Older adults usually maintain the same activities, behaviors, personalities, and relationships that defined their early experience. Weakness for this is the definition of normal aging is based on males, not females. Older adults with chronic illnesses are not addressed. The theory does not demonstrate how social institutions affect individuals as they age. Instability and change of personality. We've talked about this a lot, and I feel like it continues to come up. And so, relatively, remember, personality states are relatively stable. So don't forget that. Okay, because that will be a question on the NCD for sure. I say for sure, but I think. External and internal events shape personality traits across the life course. We know that, right? So maybe you've been some way for a long time, but you go to EMDR and you do all this work on yourself, or you go to some other type of in-depth therapy and you change. So personality traits are pretty stable, but other things could change. Several big five personality factors change in late adulthood. Aspects of conscientiousness and agreeableness tend to increase as adults age, and extroversion increases in some older adults who just don't care anymore. Also, lower neuroticism. So yay, for those of you who are scoring high on the N in the big factor five. Women score higher than men on neuroticism and agreeableness. There are very few differences in aggregate measures of extroversion, openness, and conscientiousness. So make sure you read that. On the top of 444, good paragraph, five-factor model for older adults. Just make sure you know that. I think that's really important. You should know that. You can talk about that. The way in which older adults have managed adverse circumstances is predictor of how they're going to handle hardships in later adulthood. So if they've been super resilient and strong and tough and really focused on health and wellness, they're going to be able to bounce back more quickly. And resiliency, being studied in the literature, is really powerful. The more resilience you have, the better you're going to fare in almost every area of your life. So resilience, super important. Etc. And this says how you can mediate that with the resiliency for those issues like complicated grief. Spirituality and aging, clearly important for a lot of people, but does not necessarily increase with age, interestingly enough. You may develop a more sense of spirituality, a more mature sense. People are more helpers, like altruistic, and many elders are devoted to overcoming division, oppression, and violence, like the racial trust building group is made up of a lot of people who are retired or older. Now, adults, research has shown that adults who have a faith tend to be more happier and healthier and more coping and experience more control, and that religious community connection is really powerful for age. Gerotranscendence is a process that occurs when older adults shift their focus to a more cosmic and a transcendent view of the world. There's so positive effects of spirituality and religion, helping clients to see if they're on the fence about that could be helpful for them in whatever way that they believe. There's some good think about it questions there. Your forum for 18. Please write about one thing that you learned in this class that you found interesting. Now, what piqued your interest? What did you learn? What have you learned thus far? That's all I want you to do for today. For 18, we're done. Good job. You made it listening to these lectures. I hope they weren't too boring.